Hello and welcome to the last formal episode of the podcast for season 1 of this podcast, Wayfair Recording Podcast. Today we are talking about monetization. Super fun. A lot of people love to talk about ads and how to make money from their podcasts. And I can tell you right off the top that I am not an advertising agency. But I do have a couple of tips and tricks to kind of get you thinking about what to do to make money, to find a way to get a good earning. And it really is going to depend on like what your needs are, what you are trying to go for with your podcast. And there's a lot of avenues that I can kind of help coach through the ideas of what monetization looks like. But if you are looking to just kind of get it off your plate, you're not really interested in actually doing that type of work, which I totally get it. I mean, trying to design a podcast and be a host of one, and it's already like a ton of work. But I would recommend, checking out ad agencies out there. And there's a lot of hosting websites out there too that also do some like networking deals and can help look for ways to get ads on your show. But this will be a pretty interesting episode, and I'm really excited to go through it with you. But before we jump into it, just a quick reminder, if you're just checking this episode out for the first time, welcome. This is a pretty exciting one to jump right into. But we are going through the strategy workbook that my podcast production agency provides to all of our clients for free. If they're signing on to do a package and service with us, this is what I provide, and we talk through and we do some consulting with them. I try to treat this whole season like as if you're going through a consulting session with me, just so you guys have a familiar face. And if this is I think this is episode 9 at this point. I can't remember where we're at with this show as of recording this. But if this is let's just say it's 9th. If this is your 9th episode, jumping in with us, then welcome. Thanks for returning. I'm glad you like the information that I'm sharing with you. And don't forget to subscribe, like, share, all that stuff. I'm going to probably repeat that at the end of the episode. But let's go right into it. So monetization. As I said earlier, it's really going to depend on what you're looking for with your monetization, with your podcast. And I guess to kind of give an example as to why that sounds ambiguous, I guess, or situational, is that I would say typically, because there's no wrong way of doing this, I guess, at the end of the day, typically, I would say it's smarter to do something like Patreon if you are doing a community-driven show. And community-driven is like, the easiest example is going to be true crime, right? True crime is going to be a personality host behind the microphone that is telling the listener a story. And those listeners have a common interest of true crime, of court cases, of criminals, of interesting stories, and they want to share these stories with each other. So Patreon is going to be a pretty common avenue for that. Whereas maybe if you are doing a program for your B2B, you might want to do something much more sponsorship driven, as far as like, your company could be advertising your podcast in a sense, right? You could do both, where if you are a true crime podcast, you could do both. You could have like a Patreon thing, and you could invite the listeners to donate, $5 to be a part of a more exclusive club where you guys can communicate with one another. And, they could be a part of like a community where they talk on an exclusive Discord account or Facebook community account where there's a paywall to get in. But while they're actually doing their show, and there's actually like an episode that the listener can listen through, there would be ads on there. There's 2 ways to get money through that. And it could also be an incentive to where, if someone is doing giving you, $1 or $5 to be a part of the Patreon account, they would get an ad-free version of it. That's probably one of the more common ones that I've run into of people doing. So that's kind of like an entry point in thinking of how you want to approach your show. And there's a lot of different combinations and avenues that you can take this in. And if you want to go onto the PDF and kind of look at what we have laid out on there, it's on page 19. Again, if you don't have one, you can check out the show notes or the description of the video, depending on how you're listening, to download it. But I have like 2 sections to look at, and it's both brainstorming, but you can also use it if you do have interest in advertisers. For example, there's the top section that has like, who are your advertisers? Is it, common ones are HelloFresh. I remember back in the day, Blue Apron, it was all over the place. Some people are doing like Factor is another one, but that's part of HelloFresh. But there's 3 sections that you can list out, and you can say, you can even write out more if you have more. Again, it doesn't need to be just 3. It can be way more if you want. And then underneath is an associative section where, for advertiser 1, there's the ad position for them. Where are they going to go? Are they going to do pre-roll, post-roll? So before the show starts or after the show starts? Is it going to be right in the middle? That's a pretty common one. And how long is the ad going to be? It can be 30 seconds. It can be a minute. It can be 90 seconds. It can be 2 minutes, which is pretty long, but that is an option. And depending on where you sit, where you choose to have it in your podcast, can determine the value of it. So I would say, to give an example, the value of a pre-roll ad is going to be much more than a post-roll ad, because the pre-roll ad is probably going to be one of the first things that they're going to listen to for the show. And the likelihood of them skipping it is going to be much less than the end of the show, because at the end of the show, I mean, how often do you listen to it all the way through to the end when, you hit the end of the episode and then all of a sudden it's an ad. It's like, well, if you're a pretty big diehard fan, I would say it's pretty rare. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying that you don't, but it's pretty rare to find someone who likes to listen to the thank you section, to listen to the rate and review section. Sometimes people do. That's great. That's awesome. But that also includes skipping the ad. Like, it's just much more common to listen through the pre-roll than the post-roll. And so you're going to want to charge the pre-roll more than the post-roll. What those numbers look like, I have no clue. That's up to you. That's what you think is valuable in terms of relevancy to your show. Do you think it's very valuable or not? Honestly, you could do the numbers backwards if you want. If you want the post-roll to be more expensive than the pre-roll, go for it. But I wouldn't recommend it. But it's your show. Whatever you want to do. And these are again ideas on how you want to present it. I'm usually a pretty big proponent of crowd involvement, because a lot of people love to tip the people who are who they follow, who they enjoy listening to. They like to find a way to give back, especially when technically these shows are, in a sense, like free to access. So they want to make sure that they compensate for that. That's not, some people might disagree on that in some ways. I haven't really ran into anyone who has disagreed, but I mean, I'm sure people are out there who do. But yeah, if you really want to kind of get into this and talk more about numbers and structures and how to formally do it, I would recommend reaching out and we can talk about it more in depth. Because it is a pretty big, big portion of your podcast development to dedicate time to. But if you're not interested in doing that and you want to figure out a way to just get it off your plate and not have to worry about it, I mean, again, there are ad agencies out there who are way more knowledgeable about this than I am. But yeah, again, feel free to reach out. We can talk about it. But with that being said, This was the last formal episode to go through the podcast guide. We have one more episode after this. I'm going to kind of call it the season 1 finale or epilogue or whatever to season 1. Kind of talking about how the show has gone, what plans I have for this show, what season 2 could look like. It's going to be a pretty low-key episode, a little bit more candid. Not that I'm not being candid now. I hope I'm being pretty candid, but just there's no structure. There's no a podcast strategy workbook I'm running off of. But yeah, again, thank you so much if you're going to listen through this to the end, to go back to what I was saying earlier. Thank you again for listening. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. Again, download this PDF if you're interested. If this is your first time listening, I'd be happy to talk through some more of these ideas with you, even, from past topics from the season. I'd love to talk with you about. There should be information to reach out to us in the description and show notes below. And with that being said, thank you again for listening to this season. Check out the epilogue, the season finale to kind of hear more about what I have in mind for ongoing episodes and ongoing ideas. And with that being said, thank you again.